Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in for Creative Calling Podcast. I'm your host, Briana Christine, designer, illustrator, and dancer, and for most of you, a creative business coach. As we go through this series for Creative Calling Activity Book, I'm giving you all of my best tips for making it through this creative journey as you go along your path as a creative entrepreneur. Today, I'm getting right down to business. I'm jumping right into the activity, which is talking about describing your ideal client. There's so much about this that can be said. I want to say that I break this down into many specific things that you probably wouldn't have thought to ask yourself, or maybe you did know that this is something that you should know about your ideal client, but you've heard it so many times, maybe you don't know why, and you forgot why it's important. I'm going to explain it, and then we're going to go into why it's important to stick with one client before moving on and redefining who your client is, because this is something, if it's something you've already done, it's not something you can't do again and again. You just need to know when. And so we're going to talk about when to know when to redefine your ideal client. So defining your ideal client. What industry are they in? Seriously, are they in engineering? Are they in health and wellness? Are they in manufacturing? Be clear what industry is your client in. Okay. Reasons you're going to want to do this is if you're trying to streamline your process, sometimes you find that it's easier to get clients if you streamline, and sometimes you can streamline by only choosing clients in one industry. That actually goes for all of these individual factors. Is just picking one can help you streamline your process. So getting clear on which ones you want to make consistent each time and which ones you want to have creative freedom over, that goes for all of these, starting with this one. Next thing you want to know about your ideal client. What services do they provide? This is good for them to know, and it's also good for you to know, because if they provide certain services, like for instance, I work with a lot of clients who use MailChimp. So if they use services to communicate, if they use services to communicate to their audience, like MailChimp, then I can be a part of that process because I've done that over and over and over again. Also, I had one more thing about that. I'll get back to that. Company size. This is important because it can be an indication of how much money the company has, or it can be an indication of how you like to work within a company. So the company size, if it's pretty small, some of us like to work one-on-one with the business owner. So the company size might be like 1 to 5. If you know you like to work with the business owner, that's something really important to define. If you prefer to work with a creative director, you're probably looking more at a company that's the size of maybe 25 to 50, maybe even 100 to a couple hundred. So knowing who you like to work with, because working with a creative director, it's going to have a different budget, it's going to have a different vision, it's going to have different resources than if you work directly one-on-one with the owner. So knowing that for what your ideal client is, very important. What's the personality of the person you're working with? Again, going back to the creative director, if you need someone who's very much going to keep you in order, on time, micromanage, I personally don't like that, so that's something I know for me cannot have. But for some people, they may really need that. They may need someone that's going to always be on top of them. Or maybe you need someone that's going to keep you inspired, somebody that's going to make you laugh. But knowing which personalities you get along with and which personalities you don't get along with, that just comes with some self-reflection. It's going to be really, really key with knowing how the relationship is going to play out over the long term. There may be some cases in which case you work with a client for a short period of time because either personality doesn't work out or the project timeline is short. But if you know for sure that there's a client that maybe there's some personality there that you don't get along with, definitely want to keep the project timeline short or non-existent. If it's someone you get along with really well, then it's someone you can consider working with for the long run. Values. What do they value? I don't necessarily mean family values or anything religion related or anything like that. I think that's what sometimes people think of when they think of values. What I mean is, do they value having somebody that's going to give them something that's on time? And that's something that you also value. So for me, I value getting things to people before or on time. And if I have a client that, and this has happened, where they don't really care, they don't even care about their own timeline, they don't care if it's late, then my value of bringing them that project on time isn't going to mean anything to them. That can create different situations that aren't super important to talk about on this episode, but having someone who really values you, that's going to make them see you be more professional. It's also going to grow more rapport with the client. So for those of you looking for longer term clients, really important to know what are your values as a professional, getting things done on time, getting them done ethically, getting them done within a budget. Those are all things you're going to want to make sure your client also values, because the relationship's just going to go so much smoother. Also make sure budget. This is the last thing that I have. I could list so many more, but I believe that these are the top ones that you need to know for each ideal client that you define. And not just knowing the budget for one project, but knowing like your scope of project budget. So maybe you have a set of services that you provide for different kinds of clients, and knowing which budgets fit for which of your ideal clients, very important. If they can't pay you what you're worth or what you believe that you're worth, which you should always charge what you're worth, that just one goes right back to the values. You want to make sure they share the same values as you. And two, you need to, we never like to talk about it, but at the end of the day, you got to make your bottom line here, even if you are working for your creative calling. So those are my tips, or those are the definitions I believe you need when defining an ideal client. Just running back through those, you need to know the industry, services they provide, company size, personality, values, and budget. So how do you know when you're ready to run back through this and define your ideal client again? I wouldn't say that there's a specific time that you must do this. Like every 6 months you should redefine your ideal client. I say it depends on your project. So let's say you have a project that is 2 weeks long. You defined your ideal client. Maybe they met 5 of the ones that I listed, or maybe they only met 1. I'd say they have to meet at least 1, if not 2, but not all ideal clients are going to meet all of the ones we listed here today. So if they meet a couple and you have a 2-week project, you can reevaluate after 2 weeks. How did that go? Was the personality what I thought it should be with that client? How should I redefine what the personality should be with my client? Maybe the project was 6 months long. In that 6 months, did you learn what is more important to you in terms of your values? Did you find out that getting something to someone on time is a very high value and priority to you, and that client didn't see the value in that? Then reevaluate after 6 months. It doesn't need to be any specific time. You don't need to wait, but you don't need to do it every year, every whatever. So I just say after every project, reevaluate. Don't start trying, one more thing. Don't start trying to define who your ideal client is while you're working with another client, because it can ruin the relationship you have with the client you're currently working with. So if there's one thing I advise against, it's not reevaluating your ideal client while in the middle of a project. Wait until the project is over. All right, guys, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me. I've been making some changes for my own workflow. You're only going to be able to find Creative Calling podcasts on SoundCloud, and then for the time being, as well as YouTube. So either thanks for joining me on YouTube. It's great to see you guys today. And for those of you listening on SoundCloud, thank you so much for joining. If you would like to connect with me anywhere on Facebook, you still can come to creativecallingactivitybook.com. There's a couple episodes there. You can connect with me there. Facebook.com at Briana for Creatives, Instagram at Briana for Creatives. If you're interested in anything that I'm doing dance related, that's at Breezy Dances WCS. Thanks, guys.